Hello, Floodgate family. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Leadership Live. And I'm absolutely ecstatic to have Tracy MacNeal with Materna here with us today to really show the lessons of leadership and from large companies and a really exciting startup. But I know I've got an opportunity to know Tracy, but everyone listening has not. So, Tracy, welcome. And
Thank you
tell
so
us a little
much.
bit about you. Tell us about your background, Tracy.
Well, I started life as a chemical engineer in pharma and had a wonderful time at Merck. And then I decided to start my own company. And so I had my own company for 5 years, and then I split that into two pieces and sold it. Not enough to buy an island, but enough to realize that I really did enjoy the business side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I joined a startup in med devices, and I've been on that path ever since, commercializing medical devices and specializing in innovation. I got my MBA somewhere along the way, and these days I pretty much talk for a living. Nobody lets me do any engineering anymore, but yeah.
Yeah, I was very impressed with your background from engineering to the finance side, to the sales and marketing, to total business leadership. Really well rounded. Has touched a lot of spaces, right?
Thanks.
So
Thanks.
yeah,
I've always
uh,
just specialized in doing what I enjoy, and then it's not work, right? So.
that's true. That's true. And having that creative. When speaking about startups and understanding running a business, tell us a little bit about Materna and, of course, what the problem that you're solving, that need that you're solving, is so important.
Yeah. So actually, when I took the job, so I'm not the founder of Materna. The board recruited me to take over from the founder, and he was a tremendous guy and brought these technologies through the Stanford Biodesign program, and they start with clinically unmet needs, and so trying to get away from the Stanford Biodesign program is really about getting away from creating a widget in search of a problem, right? So
Mm-hmm.
starting with the clinically unmet need of pelvic floor disorders, and back when I started, I would say most people had not really heard of their pelvic floor. And a lot of that's changed in the last, since the 6 years that I've been working, and the world is really changing in this space. But the really crowded areas are around pelvic floor, pelvic organ prolapse, where the pelvic floor is too loose. And
Mm-hmm.
there's incontinence, fecal incontinence, urinary incontinence, and sexual dysfunction. And those are huge problems. I mean, a women's lifetime risk of surgery for that is 20%, and 9 times more likely if she's had a vaginal delivery, if she's given birth vaginally. And so we're actually not working in trying to fix those problems. We're in the other part of the world where our first product is for pelvic floor disorders where it's too tight, where sex is painful or impossible. And we have a modern solution called Millie, which is an expanding dilator. So we can get more into it later, but really for Millie, what we're trying to do is modernize the care for these patients. We have clinical data to show that most people can recover within 90 days. You do not need to suffer for years. And then our next big product is just under review with FDA right now, aiming to prevent all of those pelvic floor disorders where it gets too loose with an intervention actually in obstetrics, in labor and delivery, trying to make vaginal delivery safer for moms. And that's a huge new product that we're really excited to launch hopefully next year.
Yeah. I think you shared with me previously the percentage of times that actually there is a pelvic tear now that they're able to use the ultrasound and identify that.
Yeah, it's up to 30% of vaginal deliveries. Mom walks out with one or both sides of her pelvic floor torn off the bone, but she doesn't know that because you need ultrasound and MRI to see it. So we're part of a very new area of research to show what these injuries are and how to avoid them.
I love it. Not in the really on the prevention and not the treatment side of a
Right.
20%. It's a massive need. So that's incredible. Exciting what you're doing. But I know you've been leading in medical for your whole career, and I'm just curious. I love your thoughts on what do you think makes a great leader? What are the attributes of a great leader in medtech?
Well, as a kid growing up in pharma, George Merck said something along the lines that medicine is for the people, not for the profits. And if we've remembered that, they've never failed to appear. So I think that it's patients first, always, always, always. And and it is easy to lose sight of that sometimes with the pressures that we get to grow revenues and and be awesome in all the ways. But I think that as long as you're genuinely improving the standard of care, you're reducing costs, you're making things easier for clinicians and ideally more profitable for hospitals and payers, you can hit all of those, then I think then the leadership piece becomes about authenticity. And that's how I think about it, is
Yeah.
not losing sight of my own humanity, yours, and everybody that I work with, and leaving some space for people to be human. In fact, creating space, because I think that in a lot of aspects of our society, we're asked to be superhuman. We're asked to, leave the drama at home,
Mhm.
and we can talk more about this. But I've learned that everybody is carrying heavy stuff.
Yeah.
They just are, whatever it is, and they mostly aren't talking about it at work. But that doesn't mean it's not in there, and it will leak out. And giving people space to bring their whole selves to work, especially in healthcare, where we're
Yeah.
in the business of caring for people, I think that's incredibly important.
No, I love the way you really frame that about starting that, that healthcare leader, that med tech pharma leader needs to think about the patient first, right? And not the profits. And it's hard, but then that transitions not just the patient, but the people holistically within the company, and having that connection holistically with the people in the company and realize they're not just one dimensional, they're three dimensional, and understanding that full person versus just what their work delivery is. I think it's really well said. And that kind of really dovetails my second question is thinking about that culture, right? That culture, I think it would sound like it's caring for you, but creating that culture. And I'm curious, for the leaders, what you'd recommend or maybe have seen where people have created great culture and how they maintain it, especially through rapid growth.
Yeah, well, I think when you're small, just a few people, your the power of your chemistry and your personalities and your interest in working together can be enough, right? But yeah, it doesn't take very many people before that can really start to fall apart, and you need more structure. At Materna, as we've grown, we've one of the first things that we did was we took the time to do what's called our organizing elements. I think a lot of I call airport books, the books that on
Yeah,
leadership
yeah,
and business,
yeah, exactly. I
and
love it.
they're good books, but a lot of them will talk about what's your mission and what's your vision,
Yeah,
and I think that you do need to take time to articulate those. It may seem cheesy. I don't think one of them is more important than the other, but we took the time to do our values as a company, and the way we did that, we have a values exercise, and everybody does it. Start with 80 things that we all want, right? Balance and money and happiness
yeah,
and health, and you know but you ask people to cross things off, like, okay, what are the four or five that you just, if you don't have those things, you're not gonna stay.
yeah,
And where those things overlapped for the leadership team, those became the values of the company. And we take time to articulate those. They're things everybody wants, right? So ours are contribution, accountability, creativity. So
mhm,
accountability can get kind of heavy, right? Because nothing ever goes the way you think it's going to go. You
totally.
make the commitment, I'll have that to you by the end of July, and then whatever, there's an election, stuff happens. Um, and so, the way we ask that is, what does accountability look like now, right?
Yeah,
Maybe some things changed, and that's where creativity became a really important other value, right? That sometimes creativity is like that sort of third dimension that gets you out of the mess, where you can begin to think, okay, like, how could this be easier? What if we gave up on some ways that we thought we were going to do this, and get something better? We call
hmm,
it the or something better, right?
hmm,
I'll get that to you by the end of the July, or something better. um,
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, that makes sense. And I love. I mean, the mission of a company is that purpose, right? And if everyone's really laser focused on that purpose, and then it's easy to recenter when things get crazy. So I
yeah,
agree with you. That mission and vision is absolutely crucial.
and we give a lot of training to everyone as well. And you would think that a little startup wouldn't have the money or bandwidth for such a thing, but I think that nobody can afford to skip it, because you
Yeah.
just want to have some common language. Like, so the values, you might think, oh, well, whatever. The other value is candor, right? So we
Mhm.
say, It's not just honesty, because my truth might be my honest truth and your truth might be your honest truth, and they might not be the same thing, but we can trust each other to say what we need to say
Yeah.
and find the or something better together. So the way I view the values is it's the immune system of the company, and it's the CEO's job to enforce them. Like
Mm,
it's what's okay and what's not okay.
yeah.
And the whole company, when we talk about creating and maintaining a culture, the whole company is waiting for the CEO to do that, right?
Yeah.
They know when things aren't okay, but if you're not saying anything, right, and you're not creating a space where people can say something, we don't have a lot of that stuff at Materna, but just little things, and it helps you make decisions in hard times. We have two purposes at Materna. One is to get these products to the patients that need them because we're category creators. They really don't have anything right now. And then the other is to demonstrate to the market that when we invest in women, we all win.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants a big exit, but we want it more because there need to be more exits in women's health to help the next groups get funded.
Yeah.
And I find that the purpose is really helpful. So when things go off the rails, you can always come back to that big why, right?
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, that's a awesome purpose and drive, and just that agency that values give employees to execute also creates a lot of motivation, and job satisfaction. It's been proven over and over again.
Yeah.
So I think that is time and money well spent, even for the smallest, crappiest organization. I agree with
Thank
you
you.
all. Now, those sound like some things you've done well, right? In leadership, you've learned. But I'm curious, what lessons have you learned the hard way? And can you share that so other people
Sure.
might
Yeah,
not have?
like in the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the big switcheroos is, when we're coming up through the ranks, we always think, if I were in charge, I would do that way better.
Mhm.
I would fix this and I would fix that. And why do we do it that way? And then when you get into the seat where you nominally do have all of the authority, you realize you can't make anybody do anything, not for very long. And so this idea of having the ability to make all of the decisions, meaning that you have total control, it's really an illusion. And I think, well, for me, leadership has been a journey of self-reflection. The journey always ends in the mirror, right? So who am I being? I think it's way more important to know who I am being right in this moment than what I'm doing, because everyone's plugging into it,
Yeah.
especially for the CEO. But it's true for everybody. We're always plugging into each other, and if I'm showing up as less than my best, it's not super helpful. But one of those stories, I guess I can share. I had an opportunity to. I was chief strategy officer of a company, and I had the opportunity to implement. So the big strategy that we wanted to implement was lean
Mhm.
manufacturing. So Six Sigma and all of that stuff. And as an engineer, and I like operations management. I like making things efficient. It's fun. Some people like that, some people don't, but I do. And to me, it was a huge opportunity, and it seemed like it would be fairly straightforward to explain to people why this was going to be great. And the first thing that I learned was that you come in and you say, "Hey, I want to help you make this more efficient." People hear you're doing it wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and people can get very defensive. And honestly, I think this is true in a lot of ways, that managers can come and say, "Hey, do it like this or try that," and people are bringing all their own projections to the table here. All the stuff that's going on in their life, the way their parents treated them or whatever. They've got their stuff, and they're not hearing you; they're hearing their projection of you. And
Correct.
so helping people, I realized that we were not going to be able to do the thing. And this is just broadly true. You're not going to be able to do the thing until you create a space where people can get comfortable, where they can trust that they're going to be heard, they can understand what's in it for them. And it takes more time than you think it will take. And I call it the go slow to go fast. But you have to start with the people and help them own it themselves. And I found in that initiative that the people who are our biggest critics, our biggest resistors, once we took them, and we ended up doing a lot of leadership training, that everyone is a leader. Leadership and management being different things, right? Some
Of course.
people are not managers. Some people don't have the authority to make a lot of decisions, but everyone is a leader, and helping people understand in what ways that they are leaders and where they have agency and authority in their space and asking them to step into that, we found that our biggest critics became our biggest advocates.
That's great. I think that's a really huge lesson is when you, before you get into a management role, right? You think, well, I would change everything. It'll be easy to change. But in reality, it's you're not, you can't, just tell people, you can probably once or twice, but it's not going to work very well. Right.
It's not
And as soon
doable.
as you leave, they're going to go back to what they did. Right. So
Yep.
it's not, that's not leadership. That's one management, and then you end up might being that micromanager. But that lesson of how do you inspire, helping them understand their problem, helping empower them that they're solving something themselves as a leader, and they can create change with an organization is powerful, and that's sustainable. I think that's a great lesson.
Yeah. One other that's maybe worth sharing, and this was at Materna. So as we were growing and scaling and moving, and one of the novel things about being in a startup is you're a different company every year, right? Because
Yeah,
you're
yeah, you're at different levels, right? Yeah,
right. So finding that continuity, but then also being able to bring on new people. Some people rotate off, right? If when their work is done, that's kind of a weird thing. They do everything right and then they go because they're done. Um,
yeah.
but what we were struggling with when we hit maybe 10 or 12 people, we were struggling with our COO, our COO and I were struggling with having clear visibility to everything that was happening in the company. And we realized that we were becoming bottlenecks because we hadn't pushed decision making out enough into the organization, and we couldn't figure out how to get enough information with a feedback loop that people could then make decisions in a collaborative way. And so we took the time to implement a system with some organizational development, and it's got software associated with it, but it's really not about the software. It's more about the practice of taking the time to articulate the value you're trying to create. And I remember when the consultant that helped us put it in, he said, Tracy, you should be everyone in your company should be able to answer the question, what am I doing today to create value for the company?
Great.
And I was like, that is not a thing that is possible on planet Earth. It's just how would everybody be able to do that?
Yeah.
But we have done that, and it is possible. We were asking, Kelly and I were asking for dashboards, like, but we were just getting infinite to-do lists and really linking it to taking time to articulate what value we are trying to create,
Mhm.
not just financial value, because for sure everybody understands that one, but there's also community capital and employee capital and and partner capital, right? Are our vendors just vendors or are they partners?
All
And
right.
where how we make decisions and having all of that linked and getting away from just an org structure. It's hard to describe, but getting away from just an org structure and really understanding who your customers are, even within your own company.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I had a leader early on that says he never wanted to be the self-limiting factor of the organizational growth, and that happens so much, especially when small organizations become bigger ones quickly. They haven't created that structure and empowerment, and the way it sounds like you've created that is really articulate how are they bringing value every day, and they own that bringing value no
Yeah.
matter
And
what.
everything we have is linked to that. We start, and I was in so many meetings, and Kelly, our chief operating officer, was also in all those meetings because nobody knew when they needed me or her. And so they invited both of us. And so we were all just dying. And these days I go to 2 meetings on Monday and one on Friday, and if I go to those 3 meetings, I know what's going on in the company.
Yeah, that's great. I love it.
Yes.
Now you mentioned a lot about creating that culture and the people and the decision making, the empowerment, but it's also you have some high performers, right? Especially as you grow. You've had them probably in the past as you've grown. How Give me some tips on developing them. What's worked with you? Maybe someone developed you in a way that was meaningful.
Yeah, I've had really wonderful managers, and a couple of sponsors, right? And those are different things, right? But I've been very fortunate in my career that I had wonderful people taking care of me the whole way. Um, I think I'm. you'll find with where we're heading these next few questions, these are hard things,
They
right?
are.
High performers, I find high performers tend to develop, whether you do it consciously for them or not, right? They're hard drivers. They'll find things that they want to do. That's part of what I think makes a high performer is they're self motivated, but for sure making budget and time available. And I've had to do this. I found that at Materna, I'm like making people consider continuing education. I've had so much continuing ed, and I love training. Some people hate it. They're like, oh, I got to go do my training. I'm like, you're getting paid to go learn something. This is awesome. That's how I think about it.
Right.
Right. But folks get very mission driven and they get super busy and they're like, I don't know if I can take that time to go do it. I'm like, you need to take the time to go do it. Go sharpen the saw. Go have some fun. Go meet some people that you don't know. Get some ideas. Right. It's important to, and things are changing out there in the world so much, so quickly, especially with AI now, and but just everything's moving so quickly that it is very important for high performers to take time out of the office and go network, go be on panels, go meet people. I think sometimes the fear would be like, oh, I don't want to lose my people, so I don't want anyone to know them. It's like, look, they're getting inbound calls anyway, right?
Yeah. You'll
So,
definitely lose them that way.
try to make them happy, try to give them things that are going to expand their horizons, challenging roles. We do a thing at Materna called leadership touch points. So everybody needs some kind of review process, but everybody hates reviews, right?
Right.
Everyone hates it. Ours is a very collaborative, right? So the employee goes first, and then it's all based around our values and purpose and all of that stuff. So we never leave that stuff behind. It's woven into everything we do, including the leadership touch points. But there's a part of the leadership touch point that's about, it's basically a stop, start, continue. Like, what are we
Yeah.
doing that we need to stop? What are we doing that we need to keep doing? And what do we need to start doing that we aren't doing? And also that's true for you as a person. What are you kind of bored with what you're working on, and where are you looking to grow, and then getting that documented so that we can have some actionable plans and hold ourselves accountable to them to make sure that those people have what they need and what they want.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I mean, you kind of have to really teasing out really what they want, what that question is. And one of the things you identified, whether it's through education or projects, is high performers by definition are driven. And high performers love a great challenge. Great people love a great challenge. And what I've learned to sit and where is we'll get great performers come to us asking for the new role. Why? They're not challenged. That's the number one reason. It isn't compensation,
Mm-hmm.
as the people would think. It's because they will say they're not challenged. So how do you challenge? And I love that at great performers because that helps them develop into what they're really looking for.
Yeah.
Now, this one's a little near dear to my heart, is finding and evaluating new talent. I know it's a difficult, but what tips, if any, do you have on that's worked for you in the past?
Well, I'm going to open with a point of humility. My mom's 85. I'm still getting to know her, right? It is very hard to get to know people quickly and to get to a reasonable evaluation. So I do not necessarily rank myself as like a super with superpowers here. I think it's challenging. Um, I think more, and at a startup, because we don't have a lot of resources to train people, like you got to come in knowing how to do this job. So we're very much biased towards people who have a track record in this thing,
Hmm.
but also uh, people who have demonstrated the ability to figure stuff out. Because that's the other thing in a startup. Unlike at I think at big companies and I was a big company person at one time, right? There's just a lot of resources there. If you don't know, you can go figure it out. You can bring on some consultants and bring on an agency, or there's probably in a company of 50,000 people, there's probably someone you could ask. In a startup, you get a curveball from the universe, and you got to have people who are willing to just figure stuff out. And I think that's linked to how we find talent. We certainly do use recruiters; they're very important. I find if we need somebody great and fast, the recruiter is the right way to go, because it's just so slow. It's so much work to find people. But if you need something, you have to go find somebody. I would tend to use a recruiter. What's nice is if the network can bring people to us, right, where there's already an affinity. I would say Materna, because we're doing something that's helping women and because it's so novel, we have a lot of fans. We got a big fan base for a
Yeah.
startup our size, I think. And so we get a lot of people, staying in touch and following us and seeing if we're hiring and stuff like that. But yeah, but it's near and dear to your heart. What's your answer to that question?
Yeah, no, no. I think you hit on some key things. One is really understand the attitude, right? You need the experience, right? Those are the black and white, but you also have to identify that attitude. And for you, that's the ability to operate in ambiguity, right? You don't. They're going to get curveballs. How have they done that? How have they operated in the past? How do you make sure you tease that out? The other thing I think I heard you say that's a lot of people don't think about is creating fans. Not just fans in the clinical setting when they go to launch and the physicians and the hospitals, but fans in the community, because I think it's 70% of people will look at a company's brand and culture before they even engage.
Wow,
So if
seventy
you're not,
percent.
yeah, if you're not ahead of that number, you're not ahead of that. You're not getting those people that are just like, should I? They'll move on because they're already happy. So I think those are a couple of the elements that are really crucial. And then obviously having a great system to be able to, it's a numbers game too, just like
Mhm.
anything else, right? To be able to have enough connections and conversations. Yeah. So it sounds like you're taking a humble approach, but you've got a lot of the key elements in place there, Tracy. I'll tell you. So
Thank you. I appreciate it.
now there are people listening to this that are aspiring leaders, aren't a leader yet, right? Or manager. They might lead. I shouldn't say lead. They don't have a management responsibility, but they want to be tapped for that. What would you recommend? What would you say to those individuals?
Well, I'll start by saying I've never gotten a promotion that I didn't ask for, right? You have to advocate for yourself. And it's hard. Our society gives us all very mixed messages. Like we're supposed to all be amazing all the time. And all the likes, right?
Yeah,
It's on all the social, we're just supposed to be amazing all the time, but we should never ever be, you know, we shouldn't brag. And so I find that for if we're talking about self advocacy, that is not the place to be shy. Your LinkedIn profile is not a place to be shy. Your resume is not a place to be shy. It should be accurate, right? But that's not where you should be humble. I think it's important to really take time to make sure that your managers are aware of all the things that you're doing and what you want.
right.
I think, I'm curious what you think about this, but I have been surprised in my career over and over at how seldom people are able to articulate what they want.
Hmm.
And even when I've asked people what they want, a lot of times they've never been asked. A lot of people grow up in what I've learned is people grow up in families where nobody has ever asked them what they want. That's not a relevant question, right?
Right.
They may even have beliefs that are woven into their family fabric that, like, it's wrong to want things, right? Don't be selfish.
Yeah.
And we take a very dramatically different approach to that at Materna. That, like, we want to know what you want because everybody gets what they want or something better, right? So if we're trying to figure out where to go to lunch together and I have this idea and you have that idea, we figure out, well, why do you want those things? And you figure out the thing that could satisfy both, right? That's the way we approach it. But if you're not saying what you want, no
Yeah. Or
one can
even
help you. And so I think that's really at the base of this. That's Then there are some practicalities, right? You could consider figuring out what you need to get from here to there and ask for that too. Hey, can I get
yeah.
training?
Right. Right.
Right?
And sometimes that question is one and the same. Hey, I would love to do X role. I see my future being Y. Where do you see, what would I need to develop? What challenges would I need? What lessons, what learning? Because it's kind of the same question, right? That you can
Mhm.
learn both, to be able to have that next step for sure. I love that
Yeah, and
idea. Like the fact that you're teasing out in your team. what do they really want? Forcing them to think 5 years down the line, what does great look like for you? Not let it happen to you, but create your future.
Yep. Yep. And if you work for a company that doesn't have infrastructure to support that, go online, Google, find a template that can help you put it into writing. Like show up with a little extra oomph
Yeah,
to make it easy
right.
for the other person, right?
Exactly. No, I love it. 'Cause, they don't they're not going to know what you need. Now, speaking about knowledge, I'm curious here on your favorite superhero. And why that would be your favorite superhero.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a nerd at heart, and I'm going to go with Superman. But I'm just
Okay.
going to take this moment to maybe qualify because Superman's just so nice. A lot of the other
And great
superheroes
hair.
are
Yeah.
right for sure. But there's a lot of conflicted and sort of dark. There's a lot of darkness that's getting woven into superheroes lately, which I think is probably reflective of where our collective mood is as a society. I think there's a lot of things that are upsetting a lot of people, and I think it's leaking into our mythology. But I'll just take a moment that, as an aside, just when Materna called, I had never heard of anything that we were working on, and I had been, as an engineer and a finance person, I'd been the only woman in the room for a long time and had not really been thinking about being a woman. It wasn't super important or helpful. And so now I'm in this world where it's all women all the time. And but when I was deciding whether to take that leap, I started doing some diligence. We were in mutual diligence for about 4 months, and one of the things I did is I started watching documentaries and reading and sort of looking at what had happened with feminism and what had been going on while I wasn't paying attention for 30 years. And I just started noticing that it had gotten not better at all while I wasn't noticing. And I had been thinking it had been getting better, but so many of our numbers aren't going in the right direction. And superheroes, like, they're all guys. And I'm just going to say that. And the women are kind of, you got some questions there. Like, they're trying to make female superheroes more and more. And I appreciate that
Yeah.
people are trying to do that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. No, and I love the superheroes. That goodness. We always need a little goodness in our world, and we all need role models we can look up to, right?
Wouldn't it be nice if
Men
there were
and women.
Superman?
Yep, totally
That would
agree.
be nice.
Well, Trace, thank you so much for taking this time and giving us your insight, into, you know, Materna and you and your background and leadership. I know I gained some really good nuggets and lessons that I can take with me to my organization. And I'm hoping those people who have listened have done that as well. You can comment below. We'll be following those comments and responding. So if there's specific comments you have for Tracy, myself, tips on talent, please comment below. And we'd love to help you there. And Tracy, thank you so much
It
for
was a
being
pleasure.
part
Thank you so much.